Good evening, everyone. We'll call the Planning Commission meeting to order. It is Monday, May 5th at 6 o'clock. I'll do a roll call. Dave?
Here.
Mike?
Here.
Kate.
Kate?
Here.
I do that too.
Oh, yeah.
Bailey?
Here.
I've done it.
Josh?
Here.
Steve?
Here. Before.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is to approve the Planning Commission minutes from April 7th.
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the Planning Commission minutes from April. Are there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is amendment request for 660 Dexter Street. Matt, you wanna take that?
Yes, so in 2021, Great River Road Flex Space was approved by the Plan Commission at their April 5th meeting. Those minutes in that packet is attached within the file that was included. As part of that, elevations were included to the city that showed accent panels on all corners of the building. The minutes indicated as well that increase in architectural material standards was something that the commission requested, at least verbally, and that the developer said would be included. Plan Commission did pass that at the time of approval. It should be noted, though, the architectural standards we did not have that we have today. Those were put in September 1st, 2023. However, the site plans the developer did submit did include those elevations with those accent panels. So at the March 3rd Plan Commission, we had a discussion regarding current developments. For whatever reason, the developer on the 5th building left those accent panels off the back corners of that building. And we had a conversation at our March 3rd Plan Commission about requiring that the buildings, a couple different properties, meet their site plans that were approved. So we reached out to Great River Road Flex Place and let them know that they currently weren't meeting their site plan submittal in terms of the accent panels on building number 5. And in return, they requested an amendment to their site plan to allow for their 5th building not to have access panels on the back. So that is what is before you tonight. Specifically, they included the picture that's within your packet. And they said, or stated in their email, the end wall does not face any public streets. Please see attached photo to show where the building 5 pad is located on the property. Now the north side is tucked right up against the wall. One of the things they did cite, and I wanted to note within the packet, is we did previously work with the storage units at 1045 Owen Road for an exterior amendment. However, that was before any building permits or development of the site plan was done. Those were approved, but turning it over to Plan Commission for comments, questions.
Did you inform the owners of the building? Because Jim French does not own this building.
These were the developers that we worked with at the time that we approved.
Correct, but they no longer own it.
So who we're contacting with Midwest Flex Space Storage at,
The association?
I believe so.
Or is that the company that's selling them? Because I think if you type up Midwest Storage, they're building one in White Bear Lake right now, which would be a different association.
Okay.
And it's not tucked up against the hill. You can see both corners from the road. Send me some pictures. That's not what it looks like, though.
Yeah.
It's built.
Yeah.
You know what?
Why wouldn't you send us current pictures?
It's this one here that's not made yet.
Is there a picture of the current building?
Yeah, I'll get in a minute. Oh, bring me your phone.
You got a better phone now.
That's the corner. You can see it. That's the back corner. That's the front corner. Front corner. Front corner. Street. Back corner.
Yeah, you can see it.
This is a 30-minute-old picture. It isn't visible.
Yeah.
So what do the other ones have that one doesn't?
It's got like a wainscoting type deal.
Like the
that's-
front, it's like the front, but it's the back.
Yeah.
I drive
So-
by it every day.
So it doesn't have the
I know what
extra.
you're talking.
It doesn't have it on the back, that back corner, but it also does not have it on this front corner.
Oh,
And those are the only two corners of all 5 buildings that don't have it.
And I call
don't
them the two
think-
back corners, but you still, yeah, you can
Yeah.
see them.
Yep. But, and the drawings that people purchased these on showed that they had them.
And I would, part of me is, they said they would do it, they should do it. Otherwise, heck, I'm gonna come in, here's what I'm gonna do what I want, go by later and say, can I change it now that I don't wanna do it all? That's
After
the
they're sold,
precedent you
he
set.
sold them already.
Right, well, the people that buy them, that's one thing, but I still say, if
Yeah.
that's what they said to us, let's do that. Otherwise, again, let's bring in a barn and then build, whatever. So if you have a set of plans, you should follow your plans. You don't bring in one set and then build off of another set. Otherwise, why even have a plan?
I mean, it's no
That's
different
kinda
than, saying I'm gonna put an asphalt driveway, an asphalt parking lot in, and then, hey, where's your asphalt parking lot? Yeah, gravel's great.
It's the same
We
difference.
just had a discussion about the, making them make good on their site plan.
Yep.
And we all voted, yes, we should go through with that, so I'm all good with making them, make it look right.
Do we need a motion to do nothing, or what are we looking for here?
I would recommend a motion denying their request for an amendment to their site plan.
I make a motion to recommend denying the request.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second to deny the request for an amendment for 660 Dexter Street. Is there any discussion on the motion? Not all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is comprehensive plan updates. First part is chapter 3, natural, cultural, and agricultural resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, last meeting, we started with chapter 1, and we started reviewing chapter 2, and we're gonna turn it over to Josh in a sec to go start finalizing chapter 2 and then go into chapter 3. But with the comprehensive survey results now completed, I wanted to take the time to at least go over those questions from chapter 2 and 3, and then we have some new members here as well. And so with that, we had 179 responses in total to our survey request. Ideally, we wanted to see about 10%, which would have been around 400, 450 people. Obviously, we fell well short of that, unfortunately. But still, the 179 responses we did get did have some good information. 49% of those people lived in Prescott for more than 28 years. Another 29.6% have lived here 6 to 19 years, and about 21% of those respondents are retired. Age of the responders, we had a good mix, about 42% from 35 to 54, 24% 55 to 64, 17% 65 and older, and then 16% 18 to 34. So we'll touch on this again. Some of this will be a repeat, but now since we've had all the results, I wanted to go over these. The agriculture, culture, and natural resources section. Final results, we did have 83% of respondents agreed that the city should increase efforts to protect sensitive natural resources. 6.7% were not sure, and then about 9% disagreed with that question. And then in terms of fill in the blank, agriculture use, the comment summary, we had 49 responses give an answer on this question, 130 people skipped it. Strong concern among residents about the environmental impacts of agriculture and urban development, particularly regarding water quality and farmland preservation. The focus on nitrate and pesticide runoff from farming operation, which are seen as contributing to water table pollution and increasing the cost of safe drinking water for residents. Unease about the removal of natural vegetation like fence rows, support for organic farms, community-supported agriculture and local food production initiatives like community gardens, importance of preserving farmland as a critical resource for food security and maintaining Prescott's rural character, and then finally opposition by some to the continued conversion of agricultural land into residential or commercial developments, urging the city to reduce lot sizes and setbacks to limit sprawl and protect open land. So this is just the summary of these 49 responses, kind of broken out for you to see. Cultural resources, community events felt that, or cultural resources, community events, 72% felt that this was a valuable item within the city. Historic preservation, 59% of respondents. Public art, 35%, and then other was about 8%. We touched upon this last meeting, condition and quality of trees. 37% of responders were very or somewhat satisfied with the trees in their neighborhood. 29% were neutral on it, and then 34% were somewhat or very dissatisfied. Looking at the comments that were made, 44 people did respond. That summary, many residents were concerned about the loss of mature trees in Prescott, particularly due to the urban ash borer and the lack of adequate replacement. Disappointment that trees removed for sidewalks, disease, or development have not been replanted. A call for a structured tree replanting initiative, ideally involving larger trees rather than saplings. Desire for the city to develop a long-term forestry plan, and then people felt, or some of those comments felt, parks lacked sufficient shade. Some trees are overgrown or poorly maintained, and dead or dying trees diminish the city's visual appeal. And then additional comments just overall on the agricultural and cultural section. 30 responses overall. Desire to preserve and enhance Prescott's natural environment, particularly through increased tree planting, thoughtful landscaping, and park development. Interested in replanting programs. Need for long-term protection of natural spaces amid future developments. Better connectivity of trail systems and strategic parkland acquisition. Concerns were raised about neglected or poorly designed spaces, such as insufficient access to marina spaces, unattractive developments lacking green buffers, and limited parking at parks. And then finally, more proactive communication about existing outdoor resources and a unified vision for nature-based recreation and community engagement. So then turning to housing, which will be starting tonight. Of the respondents, 90% live in single-family homes. 43% have children living in their household. So existing housing in residential areas, quality of housing, 36% said it was a strength, 44% were neutral, and 20% thought it was a weakness. Our character of our residential neighborhoods, 54% thought it was a strength, 35% were neutral, and 11% thought it was a weakness. And then our range of housing options, 27% thought it was a strength, 34% were neutral, and 39% thought it was a weakness of the community. Existing and household residential areas appeal to new families, 52% or 53% thought it was a strength, 28% were neutral, 70% a weakness. Appeal to young professionals entering the community, 35% a strength, 31% neutral, and 32% a weakness. For retirees, 15% thought the housing in the community was a strength, 37% neutral, and about 47% thought it was a weakness. For seniors, 11% strength, 27% neutral, and 61% thought it was a weakness. In terms of availability of affordable housing, 15% thought it was a strength, 35% thought it was neutral, and 51% thought it was a weakness. And then the value and cost of housing, we'll say this kind of echoes throughout the entire country right now in terms of cost of housing. 22% thought it was a strength, 35% thought it was neutral, and 42% thought it was a weakness. And then finally, the quality and type of housing that's existing, the appearance, 51% thought it was good to excellent. Cost, 56% thought it was fair, and then property maintenance, overall, 46% thought it was fair, and 45% thought it was good to excellent. We only had 16 responses on this, so the comment summary, desire for improved neighborhood aesthetics and infrastructure, concerns about untidy yards, deteriorating homes, inconsistent lacking property maintenance standards, more trees, fewer curbs and sidewalks, and better enforcement of property appearance code. I do want to kind of stop there and just, this does kind of clash with this statement with what we'll see future, because there were a large amount of people who wanted us to focus on sidewalks and trail development within the community. Frustration over the condition of roads and perceived inefficiencies in city services, some concern over prominence of bars, rental properties, and oversized garages relative to homes, shortage of well-maintained apartments, retirement housing, and starter homes for families and young adults. Suggestion that city planning should better address community character and housing quality. So types of housing, 66% of responders would like to see further development of senior living facilities. Another 56% believe that we need more single-family traditional detached homes. 39% are in favor of smaller homes under 1,300 square feet, and 29% are in favor of more townhouses or condominiums. And from there, things decrease with the other fourplexes, eightplexes, and large apartment structures as well. Comment summary then on overall types of housing, 52 responses. Concern over the affordability of housing for young families, seniors, and individuals with lower or moderate incomes. A lot of responses within this comments emphasize that property taxes combined with other costs are making it difficult for residents to remain in the community. Stronger interest in developing affordable seniors, smaller starter homes, and mid-priced housing. Repeated calls to prioritize long-term residents over developer interests. Existing housing stock should be renovated and repurposed before expanding into new developments. Concerns about deteriorating roads, neglected properties, lack of cohesive development planning. Some support of apartments or tiny homes, and then mentions of inadequate rental options, the poor condition of existing apartments, and a need for higher quality yet attainable housing. So with that, I'll turn it over for comments and questions to the Plan Commission if there are any about those results.
We just, some of the statements, I just want to say, like, we don't own the homes in Prescott, so like for some of this stuff, like,
Right.
try and motivate in some areas, but we don't own them.
Plus, like, some of the questions kind of depends on who you're, like, what do you think
Yeah.
of the houses
Yeah.
around your, well, it depends on your
I just want to make
neighbor.
sure people understand it, because like reading this, it seems like I can go like barge into somebody's front yard and be like, hey, see that? I want this color to be this, you know, match, please. That's not happening,
Yeah.
so.
We should focus on city matters we can control, you know, on this list. I think this is great.
Yeah, like it. But again, a lot of people, it's like, how much government do you
Yeah.
want? Do you want government to tell you
No,
everything?
You don't want that much, really.
Talk to your neighbors, one. Number
Yeah.
two, yes,
Yeah.
if you had an ordinance say, hey, you gotta clean up your yard, you can do that, but yeah, color a house, and just because they can't afford to put a roof on, they gotta do it, you know, it's that, it's always that fine line of, too much government's not always good neither, it's maybe just communication with your neighbor.
And you had that one with the sidewalk. I think a lot of it is because people don't want to shovel their sidewalk.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
I mean, I don't care the two we just did. I would say maybe a third of them don't shovel their sidewalk.
And that's just a matter of having staff to be able to go out and say, here's your ticket, get it shoveled or not. I mean, I just don't
I
know what
understand
happened.
that, but that's, I think, is why we saw that particular item on there.
And yet, there's a lot of people say, I like to walk on a trail or a sidewalk.
I do find it interesting that the condos thing, that was low, because I feel like a lot of the stuff that's coming out right now, we're talking about like condo here, condo there, condo there. Doesn't seem like that's what people want though.
Well, you look at Hudson, it's all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, they're.
And if I don't know, River Falls too, it's a lot of apartments and or condos, townhomes.
Well, that's the only thing anybody can afford.
And even then, they're 2,001 for a 3-bedroom, River Falls. Holy
How much did you
smokes.
say?
What, $2,000 a month?
Oh, it is that much?
3-bedroom.
You almost own a house. Almost.
And then like the tree issue, you know, they talk about trees. And I don't know what our ordinance says, but it'd be nice if every house, new house would have to put a tree in the front yard, or the developer. And again, it's another cost the developer has to have, but he can pass it on, or he can make his development look nice, but maybe every house, the developer should give us, here's enough to put a tree up, and the house goes up, then the city will come in and
It's
put
not
the
that
tree.
expensive for a developer to put a tree in every yard.
Well, but that's what I'm saying too, so maybe it's even the developer's agreement though,
I mean,
'cause-
I got a huge tree installed in mine, and it was several $100s, but
right, but that adds a cost, you know, people, oh, affordable housing, well, adding a tree, $700 is another cost of the house, but in reality, even if it's not as big as you're talking about, and I hate to say the developer should put the trees in when they put curb and gutter in, because half the time the excavator runs it over. We all know that, or that's where the driveways go, they dig it out, they don't replace it, so maybe it's a matter of, you give us an escrow account, and then when a permit is pulled and finalized, now we're gonna put a tree in the front yard.
yep.
I think that, because that would help that one issue, and I think that's important. I just happen to go through mine, I just went back to town up in Great Rivers, and I bet you a third of the houses don't have a tree in the front yard.
Well, I know, like, my neighborhood, it wasn't required when it was built, and most people have put in trees. There's a few houses that haven't, but most people have.
Right, neighbor puts one in, you put one in, because yeah, it looks
You know,
nice, you know.
keeping up with the Joneses type deal.
That, and I think-
Lawn is good.
Along with what you guys are saying is also that we've lost so many in the park, even over at Freedom Park. I mean, there's 6 or 7 that were right out the front. There isn't a tree there now.
And then the fine line is the city only has so much money,
Well, I realize that.
you know,
Well, I think
unless we
that-
can write for grants, and I don't know if there is such a thing.
The biggest issue, and we've talked about this, we can afford, like replacement of trees in front of Freedom Park. The biggest issue is how do we make sure they're maintained and watered and they don't, die right away? Because our public works staff is 8 people. I mean, having them, fill up a tank every day and trying to water it and making sure when we go through dry spells when they're also trying to do everything else is just the biggest problem we have. And
Park volunteers, you can always ask, hey, would you be willing to water,
Yeah,
adopt the park kind of thing?
yeah, with the chamber, well, is it the chamber that's watering?
Chamber does the
plants
downtown
on
flowers and
stone?
stuff, but you get 2 or 3 people say, adopt a park. When you adopt a park, you just gotta make sure you water it.
Fill the bay once a day.
Exactly.
We got the Clear River group that's doing.
So that's an option,
some of that.
but it's reality. Our staff isn't big enough to do a lot of this, even like this sidewalk shoveling. If we had enough staff to say, all right, it's after the storm, we're caught up, now we'll send someone out to plow it. Just don't really have the staff, but maybe you contract that out. Okay, you didn't mow or shovel, 2 days, we're gonna hire and charge you for it. Cause I like sidewalks,
Well,
and they should have more sidewalks and trails, we all know that.
well, my wife and I walk them year-round, basically, at least 4 or 5 days a week. And during the winter, we spend a lot of time on the road.
Sure. The only thing that sucks about, I've never liked the sidewalk rule in any town, is like, what if, like, you're a snowbird, I wouldn't even shovel my driveway, but I have to shovel a sidewalk?
That is the bummer.
But it's
You know.
just like, what was it, Two Rivers and that Gordy's that now I guess is not gonna happen. They never shoveled anything. Oh, I heard that the person who was gonna take it down, what was it?
But we talked about, talking to the homeowners, if we put a tree in the boulevard in front of your house, would you be willing to water it? If you're not willing to maintain it, then we wouldn't put one in, because we don't have the staff to do
Yeah,
that.
couldn't you do like a
Yeah,
tree
that's
sign up there?
also an
Tree sign
option.
up? I don't want one in my yard, by the way, so don't replace mine because it was not the right.
Come
color.
on.
No, get them out of there. They are way too close to that curb, get them out.
Oh, I
So-
agree with that. Don't put them close.
No, no,
Mine
put it
are like
close to
right
curb,
on
more
the
than-
curb.
But
They're kind of
like the
I
boulevard
don't
is,
want
in
them
a lot of places, 15 feet off the curb.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you can put them there. The ones that are close to the curb are gonna eventually bust the curb and,
Well, the curb or the
run
sidewalk.
up the street, so you don't want them that close. But
And then if you,
And then we talked
Oh,
about
then it gets into somebody's pipes
an
going in the
assortment of
house,
trees,
there's the city's
not
Oh,
just the same
responsibility.
one. That way if they get a disease, they don't all die at the same time. I mean, we did it with the elm trees, and then we did it with ash
Easy.
trees. So there are disease-resistant trees, and,
Yeah.
we could look into that, so that's something we could look to the future.
I like Bailey's idea. People can sign up for a free tree.
Yeah, and
We'll
you
put it
take
in
care
your-
of it.
We will install it in your yard and you have
You
to
take care
maintain
of
it.
it.
I would do that.
And if
I'd
you
take
got
one.
one and it dies, unless it was like for some disease reason, it doesn't get replaced if it's from water.
Yeah, you only get one every 10 years or
But
something.
then it does beg the question though, like if you have it and it's close to where their water's coming in, so like, their curb key.
Yep,
And we have we have a tree.
that's why
that
we
tree
install it.
starts- Yeah, but what I'm saying though is like roots and stuff later on, are we then responsible for that?
City's only responsible up to
Right.
the water shut off for the water. And, the homeowner's responsible for the sewer from the house to the main,
Yeah.
correct?
Even
Correct.
if it's the city's tree that got it.
Yeah.
Well,
That's why we say put it on their property.
Yeah.
if we did something like that, we'd have some sort of agreement that basically saying you're agreeing
That's-
to maintain this.
It's
and it
your
would not
tree.
be whole.
I just constantly think of
We're gonna use your
liability
tree now.
in my
Right.
head, so. yeah. Okay,
We had a tree committee at one time, didn't we? And then we don't now?
Yeah, so 2016 or 2015, we had I think it went back all the way to 2012. There was something that established a tree commission or tree committee. We have a record of it meeting once, and essentially we have a Parks and Public Works committee that already meets, that's comprised of 3 council members. So the idea was, that committee can review, plus a lot of these tree decisions can be made by staff, Public Works. I mean, if we have a dead tree, do we really need to bring it to committee to talk about removing a dead tree? Staff can do that, and then we can remove it. We don't have to. So as we remove the tree committee from the ordinance, and we just transfer that responsibility to Parks and Public Works or staff where necessary.
I will say that the Clear River Trails group is going down into McGee Park and they are cleaning out the nasty trees and they are working on replanting some maples and some other stuff down there, so they're doing some tree management down there.
Yes, we just actually shared that on our Facebook page, that
Yep,
Clear River Trails planted 14, I believe, maple
yep,
trees.
yeah.
Matt, what drives this? What drove this to go out on Facebook and for people to participate? What was the driving factor?
Well, I mean, really, the
Just
process,
feedback
the
for
comprehensive
this.
plan process.
Sure.
It's really, I mean, because you'll see all the questions have themes and they're tied into each element
Sure.
of what you're gonna be looking at.
Did Cedar Corp
We did
push
not.
this,
That was
or
not
you
part
just
of
made
our
it?
scope, but-
Matt?
No,
Carter and Matt.
Carter, before he left, put it together, and we brought it to the Plan Commission, got it approved, and then we put it out. And one of the reasons we did do it this way is because in the past, when we've done it, we did a committee, but looking back at those minutes, it was sparsely attended, and it was made up of like the same individuals of 4 to 5 people. So we thought, well, if we could put this out into there, I mean, ideally, again, like I said, we hope to get 10% of the population, which would be around 400 people, but even this is, I think, more, or beneficial compared to just having a smaller group of people.
I thought it was a really awesome thing when it came out and I saw it. I participated and I thought some feedback might be that it was quite long. You'd probably get better response if you could maybe target a topic going forward, because I think it's really neat to get this feedback. So often we sit up here and make decisions with an empty room, and it's fun to hear what the community, if they align with us or
Yeah.
not. And but if you did like a topic in a smaller survey, you probably get phenomenal response. But I think this one took a while, which is, it probably had to address what we're covering. But in the future, I think they're valuable. We should do more of them, and we should maybe just shrink them down to almost nothing and just get, engagement. I thought it was good.
If there's no other question, I'll turn it over to Josh.
Do the chapters on the desktop. Thank you. A couple new faces since last month, I think. So again, my name is Josh Miller. I'm a senior planner with Cedar Corporation. I'll be with you to work through the comprehensive plan update. It's a plan that we have to do it's a 20-year plan, that has to be updated every 10 years. I think you guys do a pretty good job of keeping up on stuff. We did have an update 2 years ago, and we did a bypass route around the east side of the city. And that, I guess, would qualify as an update every 10 years, but it's probably not sufficient. The statute doesn't define what update means, but it probably means more than just one paragraph. So typically what I think works well in the efforts that I've done so far is working on a chapter and then coming back to that chapter in the next meeting and discussing the goals, objectives, and policies. So it's kind of like an introduction, walking through the chapter, what that all means, and then covering the goals, objectives, and policies at the next meeting, and then begin the next chapter. So we've talked about the goals, objectives, or the agricultural, cultural, natural resources chapter last month, and we didn't get to the goals, objectives, and policies at that meeting. And the survey was very, very interesting, their survey results, and what I'd like to get some feedback on is how do you want to see that survey presented in the plan? There's multiple ways to do that. Sometimes you just dump it all into an appendix at the back, or we can take the pertinent sections and put it at the top of each chapter. So like housing, we would put all those questions and related answers just broken out into the top of, so it's at kind of the forefront of the chapter, so when you get into it. So there's pros and cons to doing either way. When you're working on the plan, it's nice to see that those responses related to that topic as you're going through and developing the chapter. But at the back end, it's nice to go back and look at an appendix and say, oh, all the survey results are here. So you could do it both. You could do both, put them in each chapter, and then also have it as an appendix. But I'd be curious to see what the Plan Commission would like to see at the end. And we don't have to make a decision tonight, but as I go forward and start developing these chapters, I'll reach out to Matt and get those survey results ahead of time to incorporate into the discussion. I think that's nicer, but I don't know if the Plan Commission has a preference.
I'd say
Appendix.
Appendix?
Appendix, yep.
Yeah,
Alright.
So I would
legal
say.
standpoint appendix.
Okay. But yeah, very interesting. Some of the results, again, you're looking at a non-statistical, what do you call it? Statistically valid survey. It's just basically, it was random people could fill it out. We didn't even know if they were from in town or out of town or, you know, and so there's not like a certain percentage, you know, for a statistically valid survey, you want a certain percentage of responses. Obviously, we didn't have that in this case, but there's still good data. It just doesn't mean that it necessarily correlates to the percentages that people that feel that way in the community. So like in some cases, we have data from the census, and it shows that there's, you know, affordability, and there's certain responses from the U.S. Census that maybe contradict what the survey said. So just keep that in mind when we're going through some things. There will be some contradictions just because one's statistically valid, the other one's census. The census data, we have the 2020 census data. That essentially is, now we're in 2025. We're looking at 5-year-old data. In some cases in here, we're looking at what's called the American Community Survey, which is a 5-year average done every year, but it looks back at the previous 5 years. That data was available in 2023. So that's more current, and that's the data we're going to probably use for a lot of this information. It's not the best data, but I think the 2020 census has a lot of flaws in it too. COVID was problematic. We're seeing a lot of population adjustments that, you know, when the census came out, the numbers came out, and there's still data coming out from the U.S. Census. I don't think it's all 100% released, but most of it is by now. The other thing I want to touch on we talked about it last time just because we were dealing with household projections and population projections. I did reach out to the Department of Administration, and the population projections have been completed, but there's still going to be another 12 to 18 months before the household projections are done. So if you think about that, you're going to be in 2027 by the time we get household projections that are based on 2020 data. So we had to do some projections. We talked about that last month. We're going to just have to kind of do without what the DOA is going to provide, which is fine. But it's unfortunate because we rely on that data. We've had a lot of communities hold off on doing their plans because they've been waiting for that data. And now it's just, you know, we're going
And
to just
how
have
long
to.
have they had it now? Can you tell me how many years again? How long they've been sitting on the state and have not running it?
Well, 2020
2020?
census,
Yeah.
but the data for the 2020 census was rolled out so slowly. So
Yeah.
if you compare it to last time, the Department of Administration had the household and population projection data in early 2023 already done. Or early 2013, I'm sorry. From the 2010 census, they had everything done in 3 years. We're sitting probably 6 to 7 years out this time.
That is inexcusable.
Yeah.
That is absolutely inexcusable.
it's
I do
worthless.
statistics,
You might
that
as
is
well just stop.
inexcusable.
So, that's what we're
7
stuck with.
years.
We don't have to use the data, so there's no state mandate
I'm a
that you
letter
have.
writer. That is inexcusable. I'm not even kidding that.
I get it, and I don't know the reasoning behind it, I just reached
They're all
out to them
working from
and
home.
government.
They shouldn't have anybody bugging them.
Government.
so. Well, we'll move on with the goals, objectives, and policies
Reply to the
with,
email, what'd
yeah.
you do this week?
Yeah.
what's that?
I said maybe they were one of the ones that didn't reply to the email that, what'd you do this week? Nothing. Sorry. That bothers me.
So, we'll like I said, we'll revisit those numbers back in the issues and opportunities, that's where we have our projections. As we kind of get through other chapters, we'll go back and visit this before we're done. But to go over the goals, objectives, and policies, some of these are taken from your past plan. I think most of them were, so some of them I just want to go with the plan commission to see if they're still relevant. We talked a little bit about in the survey agricultural, cultural, and natural resources. And I think trees, obviously, we will want to discuss. The agricultural resources really talks about the preservation of farmland, preservation of prime farmland. But what you guys touched on before was really the nitrate levels and things like that could have an impact on the well water or water quality. And there's really not a lot in here on that. So maybe that's something that we focus on in our policies or in our recommendations. Now, just to kind of reiterate, the goals, objectives, and policies of this plan is not a law. In order to take the information that is decided in this plan, you have to actually go forward and adopt an ordinance that pertains to that law. So just because something's in your comprehensive plan doesn't make it law, but when you do adopt ordinances such as a subdivision ordinance or a rezoning, it should be consistent with your plan. So we can have all the nice ideas and thoughts and stuff in here, but unless you actually take the next step and actually go forward with an adoption of an ordinance, it's like, okay, that's great, but what do we do with it? So just to keep that in mind, a goal, just kind of overarching desire, an objective is what you want to achieve with that goal, and a policy is what you use to meet that objective and goal. So in the first goal for Prescott, or for agricultural resources, it's, our goal is to, Prescott residents support and have access to a diverse agricultural economy that produces commodities for regional, national, international markets and provides for local food self-sufficiency and security. It's a pretty broad goal, but an overarching goal. The objectives increase the number of farms that produce local food and build on an urban agricultural economy, protect prime farmland and soil fertility and water quality. So that one does touch on water quality. That's just an objective, but doesn't really get into it how to do that. And then increase access to healthy, locally produced food. And then the policies would be consider updating the town land division ordinance to help, should be city, sorry. That's city land division ordinance to help protect agricultural resources. I have town in here a couple times, I apologize. Discourage urban land uses in areas identified as environmentally sensitive areas. And again, when we talked a little bit about what those environmentally sensitive areas were in the earlier last month. But if you need a refresher, let me know. And let's see here. Consider incorporating invasive plant species control and management requirements in the county shoreline floodplain zoning ordinance and into the city zoning ordinance. Create urban farming ordinances that allow small-scale entrepreneurial farming within the city limits. Support existing and establishment of medium to large-scale farms in the surrounding towns. Explore options such as creating a policy, behind here. Explore options such as creating a policy allowing for the buying and selling of development rights and supporting small entrepreneurial farms to help preserve farmland and the ability to have small farms. Establish metrics to benchmarks and track the value and effectiveness of the local farm economy. Work with surrounding towns to identify prime farmland and mutually beneficial policies that support the agricultural economy. Create community gardens that are accessible to neighborhoods, and that was touched on the survey. And then expand the farmers market opportunities and capacity for vendors and buyers, and then encourage the Prescott School District to buy locally produced fruits, vegetables, meat, dairy, grain, honey, and eggs whenever possible. So those are some of the policies that we have in there. I think some of them would be challenging to do, and so we'd be interested in your feedback on that. Which ones should we look at maybe getting rid of? The nice thing about having a laundry list of things is, yeah, you got a lot of things you could do, but you kind of lose some of the important things if you have too many ideas in here. So if there's things in here that say, yeah, that doesn't pertain, we're not even going to consider that, let's get rid of it, because then it's just noise at some point.
7, so basically establish metrics to benchmark and track the value and effectiveness of the local farm economy. What kind of metrics are we thinking of doing?
I mean, that would ultimately be up to the city. I
If you had
don't.
any suggestions, I guess.
I don't off the top of my head right
Yeah,
now.
so I think that one, I'd be interested to know like how we rate that? What metric would we collect on that? Would it be much they're selling into the city? That's where I'm kind of like, I don't know about number 7. Because I feel like that one should be.
Well, it's just like 8, working with surrounding communities. I mean, if they're gonna have a development out in someplace else, we have no power to do anything with it anyway.
A little bit, but it's only
We
in
have like
the
Oak Grove.
ATZ,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but that's only like a half mile out, so you're
Yeah,
right.
that's what I'm saying, anything that's out there.
So that's a kind of a policy discussion from the city. Do you want to look at, right now you have the extraterritorial plat review where you can direct a little bit what subdivisions happen outside your boundary. There's also extraterritorial zoning, which you could adopt. I don't think you have that, do you? I don't think so. That requires a little bit more control, or allows a little more control from the city, but it's made up of 3 residents from the town, 3 residents from the city, and then there's a joint plan commission essentially that kind of oversees the extraterritorial zoning. So the city would have a little more control, a little more say over what happens. But there's other tools, you can do it. So the extraterritorial plat review limits what, you can't even deny a subdivision based on the land use. Statute prohibits that, even if you do say, okay, we're gonna limit the density or require certain density or whatever. But you can't limit it, you can't deny a plat based on the use.
Yeah.
So that's just based on a plat review. If you're doing extraterritorial zoning, you can. Zoning's gonna regulate, you know, what can happen in those areas that you decide you're gonna oversee. So that's a big policy discussion, because there's a lot of steps and, you know, especially if you don't, I'm not encouraging that, but that is a tool at your disposal where you would have some control for the properties surrounding the city. And you know, you want to be careful about getting landlocked. You already have some major coulees and natural resource limitations that are going to prevent you from growing and extending your resource or your infrastructure efficiently. You know, and there's some larger farms and things like that, you know, you want to encourage the agricultural practices, but you also don't want to landlock the city from future growth opportunities.
And if we ever annex any more land, then some of these policies could fall into that play. If we, you know, like we have the Sears property, our 150 acres, well, it's more of an industrial, you know, but we could look at other things. But, you know, in the future, if somebody wants to sell their land and we annex it, then, you know, some of these could like fall into play for us.
Absolutely. And this really ties in well with future discussion about land use. So your future land use map is going to show areas outside the city, and that can be areas where you're saying, okay, we know the north side, that's going to probably be an industrial area. So when we annex properties to the east and north, more than likely that's going to be part of that industrial park. So when you're looking at your future land use map, in order to say, when we annex something, we don't want to put housing here, or we don't necessarily feel it's important to preserve ag here, so we're going to designate that as a future land use that's going to fit with the growth of the city. So that then if there are agricultural areas that are, you know, fall in with this and they meet the future land use, then that would kind of, okay, we're going to protect that as that is prime farmland, that's good farmland. We don't see the need to develop that or grow in that direction. But yeah, I mean, there may be others, and again, was first time going through this. I'm not opposed to, even if you have comments on past chapters that we go through. We really just want the good feedback from you guys, and want to make sure that this is the plan and the elements in here and the words in here are ones that you guys are behind. So we'll move on to natural resources unless there's other questions. I think we can add something about the nitrate. There's a comment about nitrates, and I'll look up in the survey there. I made a note about that. So natural resources, the city of Prescott conserves, utilizes, and promotes the aesthetic value of its natural resources to the benefits of its residents and enhancement of a sustainable local economy. Objectives: increase the awareness of the benefits of the city's natural resources to the residents and the local economy. Increase the quantity and diversity of trees and other native vegetation in the city. Obviously, that's come up earlier tonight. Enhance the natural habitat to support the urban wildlife such as birds, butterflies, and bees. And then the policies would be conduct a tree inventory to help manage city trees. Create a policy, and generally that's usually going to be trees. It could be trees all over, but that would be really costly. Usually it's like boulevard trees or trees on your city parks and grounds and stuff. So create a policy to minimize the use of persistent pesticides on public lands and near public buildings. Support the use of local alternative energy sources that will reduce the use of fossil fuels and the community's carbon footprint. Again, I forget that I've got stuff on the, sorry. Carbon footprint, to protect the local environment and keep energy dollars in the local economy. Establish metrics to benchmark and track the value. Again, this is an effectiveness of natural resources to the local economy. Review and update the city's stormwater management plan and best management practices to reflect local goals for local water resources such as water quality, quantity, and the adapting to changing weather patterns. And number 6, pursue the Tree City USA, Bird City, Wisconsin, and Water Star, Wisconsin designations. Are you guys a Tree City? I'm guessing not.
I don't think so.
That was like 10 years ago.
Way
we
back in the
talked
day we
about-
were. We just don't have the staff to maintain,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't quite know what it takes to maintain that. I don't think it's, I don't know. I mean, I think you'd have to do an inventory and stuff, but I'm
yeah,
not
do an
sure.
inventory, maintain it, and plant somebody every year, and it's just,
It's a lot to maintain.
So, I mean, maybe that's just something you have in here as a goal, but maybe you don't have to, or policy, you don't have to necessarily do it. Any questions, or, I mean, again, we're looking at the benchmark one, number 4,
Number 4.
we could probably get rid of. And on to cultural resources, and so I did talk to Dallas, that was recommended at this last meeting, and a great conversation, a really great guy. Look forward to future conversations with him.
You listened.
What's that?
You listened.
No, he was great. And so Matt's loaning me his book of the the architectural resources in the city, so I'll have more information to add to that chapter. But it's great that you guys have that book, and I know he's interested in getting it republished and reprinted. But what a great resource to have, both Dallas and the book. So I appreciate that recommendation, and we'll be adding things to the chapter accordingly. So cultural resources, we got the City of Prescott and local organizations and groups to preserve and promote the history of the city's natural environment and people to provide the quality educational experiences for residents and visitors and enhance the local economy. Cultural resources, identify, preserve, and promote historical and agricultural sites in the community. Expand opportunities for residents and visitors to learn about Prescott's natural environment, community, and people, and improve access to the natural environment. Cultural resource policy, continue to identify and mark historical sites, buildings, and historical events. Collaborate with the Prescott Area Historical Society, local business and organizations to develop a historic preservation week. May is actually Historic Preservation Month in the state of Wisconsin, so there's a lot of activities going on already. Establish a metro, I don't know why this shows up. Bailey, this is going to
Sure
be
does.
the Bailey rule that we
Yeah.
strike out, but establish metrics to benchmark and track the value and effectiveness of promoting Prescott's. And that's actually something you may be able to do a little bit because
This
there
might be a
are,
little bit easier, but
still probably pretty challenging. And then Dallas and I did talk about that, how much economic development that historical resources and cultural resources do provide to the economy. And they did a survey not too long ago.
yeah.
So that'll be interesting information. But explore options such as trails, docks, and overlooks to provide access to the city's natural resources. And anytime we've worked with Matt, which is great, on grant opportunities, we've talked about those things with the DNR grants and things. So it's already pretty prevalent when we're looking at improvements to the parks and trails and stuff. So, any other comments on those?
The gear house is in phase 2, right? The gear house?
Yeah,
Just-
we're gonna burn it down.
That's one option.
No, I'm just kidding.
One option.
All right, so on to housing, and I probably not gonna be able to keep up on that one just because it's too much I got 3 sheets and on the screen, but I just wanna touch on some of the things that are of interest. I already talked a little bit about the DOA and numbers and the historic, or the household projections not coming in. So they really won't be, we're not gonna hold this project up for that. That's just, 12 months is too long. We're hoping to get done with this, close to the end of the year as possible. If it leaks over into 2026, so be it, but we'll keep plugging along. So just some of the characteristics. So a lot of this data, we don't have a perfect inventory, but we get this from the US Census and the American Community Survey. So about 67% of the homes are single family. The remaining are gonna be either 2-family, multifamily, or mobile homes. That's a pretty good breakout of single family to multifamily. Usually around communities that don't have a university, we often see probably 70% single family owner occupied to 30% renter multifamily. So you guys are right along there. So it doesn't surprise me maybe that some of the survey results say we have too much rental because you have a little bit more than probably typical, but it's within the range. So I think that your 67 to 33% is probably pretty good for a community your size that doesn't have a university. When you got a university, the numbers are sometimes 50-50, depending on the size of the community. So, and then same thing with the owner occupied. Again, 67% owner occupied to 33% renter occupied. And again, that's a reasonable expectation in your area. I've seen it vary quite a bit in some communities, but you do have a little bit of older housing stock. 52% were built prior to 1980. So that's, 1980 is already 45 years ago, which seems kind of crazy. I watch movies with my wife and we're like, oh, that was in the 80s and that doesn't seem that long ago. But to think about movies in the 40s or 30s, 50s, like that seems like a really long time ago when I was growing up. So just kind of an interesting perspective of time. But they're still having, 48% is built since 1980. That's still quite a lot of still new housing stock coming in the community. I do want to dive into the survey a little bit more because, people talk about affordable housing. And you guys are great, touched on it already. But affordable housing people want, but they don't want to see the fourplexes and eightplexes and things like that. And ultimately, that's what drives affordability is having density. So, I mean, it's a conundrum. You can't have everything, right? And so, you guys all seem to be pretty well aware of that already. But that's just something kind of interesting. You'd like it, but the other part of it is not having homes for starter homes are often the same homes that are used for seniors. So there's a common, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but when you're starting out either as young professionals or young family, you don't need as big of a footprint. You maybe don't have kids yet, and as people age in place or starting to get older, they downsize. They don't have the need for 3 to 4 bedrooms and things like that. So those starter homes are often can be used for retirees and elderly. But the caveat is the design of the house should be, if you can think of the design of the house to be prepared for those that don't do steps, don't want basements because they can't do steps, have a wider doorway, ADA accessibility, things like that. So that's where you can benefit from both sides of the the age in place type of housing. If new housing can accommodate those things, it'll be beneficial for your population long term. Home values are up significantly, and again, even probably in the last 2 years, we see another jump. But it's about 100,000 increase in value since 2012, the average home. You just saw the League of Municipalities had a newsletter that came out that the average Wisconsin home, I think, is $299,000 as of this past year, and they expect that to jump up too. So, affordability is a challenge. Surprisingly, though, according to the American Community Survey, the affordability for homeowners that have a mortgage is actually about 80%. So that means that 80% are spending 30% or less on their housing costs for their family. And so I was surprised by that number. Even though homes are going up, whether it seems like incomes are maybe keeping up with that for those homes, or they still have their 2% mortgage and the homes that they're in, they're not buying new homes. The ones that they're in were affordable, 5 to 10 years ago. But if they were to repurchase a home or get a new mortgage, that no longer is the case. So, we're looking at 2-year-old data, and that was before the interest rates really started to crank up. So. It is what it is. We just can't get real-time data. We could get MLS data from realtors. We could ask them for values, but we wouldn't be able to get really the affordability numbers, current affordability numbers. But the opposite was true with renters. So renters had about a 40% affordability now, which was down from about 67% 10 years ago, 13 years ago when I look at 2012. So that's... So it seems like, renting is becoming more expensive or less affordable, and home ownership. Again, affordability is all relative. You're going to be looking at the people that are in there, what's their affordability level. So like if you're making, 6 figures and you don't need much and you have a very modest starter home, well, that's going to be affordable for you. But if you're making, the county median income and you're at, and I don't know what it is for Pierce County, but if you're making that and you have a little bit higher end or a little bit bigger home, that's not going to be affordable for you. So it depends on what your income is and what house you have. So it's all kind of relative. This is just really the type of. Matt, was it you that wanted me to get rid of the oil and gas? I don't remember if that was you. Somebody mentioned that. I still have it in here, but if you want me to get rid of it, I can.
Cool for it.
I remember it, but I don't know if we need kerosene.
Yeah, we probably don't.
It's for here.
Or heating oil. It's just one of those tables that we aren't, I don't think we're required to have, but we always do it for plans, so it is what it is. But, this housing affordability and design is a new section that I put into the code because it's stuff that becomes more and more relevant in today's discussion with housing. We call it the missing middle. And so really we're looking at, and this gives a good illustration of what that is. And it's really, a lot of times we're focused on single-family detached homes and maybe some duplexes. And then we say, okay, we go all the way to a 12-unit apartment or, greater, 12-plus unit apartment. But there's this missing middle is what they call it, and it really is focusing on, the townhome style house, twin homes, fourplexes and things like that a lot of communities kind of steered away from. They don't really have a home. If you look at some of the older neighborhoods, they seem like they would fit in with that neighborhood, but as you started getting more subdivision development, larger lots, people more, it's the not in my backyard type of thing. They didn't want fourplexes, they didn't want duplexes. But this is really, you can get a lot more, you think of the cost of a new street in some cases, if it's a commercial street or a heavy street, you're looking at $1,000 per lineal foot. If you can spread that out over, 4 units versus 1 unit, that would have been in that same lot width, that's gonna be a lot better off for both the tax base and for the city. So it's just a matter of developing policies or encouraging that style type of development, and where do you want it? This type of housing maybe probably doesn't fit in the new subdivisions, that are gonna go out in the, rural part or the edges of the city. But, as you get further, closer to downtown or there's areas, those are all developed, so it'd be more of a redevelopment type of project where you're gonna encourage maybe, okay, if some of these dilapidated or areas of, blight, you could have opportunities to redevelop and develop higher density. You're still gonna get people that don't wanna see that, but
Like the
again.
historic group, probably not gonna wanna see that.
Right,
The
it
one that we
depends.
just
If
mentioned before, yeah.
it all depends.
I don't
If
think that group will probably want it.
But in some subdivisions, which I've seen in the city that I know of, they'll take a new subdivision, a lot of new ones that'll be, okay, here's your single family, and then their group of twin
We'll
homes.
do like
over-
twin homes,
over
like
to
a
the
lot of
left.
people are doing the twin home thing because it's a single level living walk-in. I mean, we were building a ton of those in Rosemount.
Exactly, and so those are demand, whether they're slabs or not, most of them are slabs.
Slab on grade.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that, hey, developer, we'll give you this little pocket for the twin homes or duplexes, it depends what you wanna call them and how they're 1 lot, 2 lots. But I don't think it's a bad thing that the new subdivisions, we kinda say, hey, you wanna do some affordable housing, twin homes, maybe?
Yeah, but they're not affordable, they make them nice
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
they're just
then-
expensive as a house.
and that's one thing-
Their
But then you-
association
And then you think
maintained.
about the actual, like, the builder, right? So now we're talking about like all the firewalls you gotta do and think about all the fire suppression on it in certain areas.
Well, see, but in Wisconsin, we don't have fire suppression, it's only just
Just wait.
firewall. But I agree with you, Josh, and I used to think that, I ain't affordable, it's 300,000, 400,000. But then I read an article that says, but that would be the one that, right now, I'm in the 1950s house, and now I can afford to step up a level, so I'd buy that twin, and now my 1950s house might sell for
Sell for
250.
$250
So
yeah.
it's the ripple of what it does, and I've learned that, I think that's stupid, even apartments, when they were asking 2,000 a month or whatever, but if they say that's just that little step, they go from here to here to here to here to here. And so that's
I mean,
why
I
say-
get that, but that's not, I guess when you say, let's build some really nice houses,
Well,
I'm not
there's-
thinking of the guy that's selling his small house because he's got money now. Oh, it's affordable housing we're building, that's,
And it is and it isn't. I know what you mean. It's not affordable because I see, but in reality, they're selling in River Falls, and I just can't see how they're doing it because they're asking 390, 400,000 for a slab on grade, 2-bedroom house.
yeah.
Well,
Well, it's all the-
It uses less
I
land.
mean, I can tell
The
you who's
Palmetto-
buying all of our
Yep,
side by
Palmetto,
sides.
they were sold
Come
before
on
they
now.
were all built.
And they were 3-something, weren't they? I don't remember.
Yeah.
These twin homes down here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they went like hotcakes. So again, you say, oh, it won't happen in the, no, I could see where you say, here's a pocket of this, and then we got the single families to keep the development costs down. You can spread it out over a few more
Yeah,
lots.
and a mixed-use neighborhood would be, and not mixed-use necessarily to the effect where you're adding commercial, but like a
Right.
mixed range of housing, even fourplexes, maybe on the entry level
Mm-hmm.
of, done nicely. I've seen them in bigger cities where you can kind of wedge those in there,
Mm-hmm.
and that can help. nowadays with a lot of development, you're gonna need some assistance, and usually that's through the TIF, Tax Incremental Finance District. And you only can do that if it's a certain density. So if you have large lots and have half-acre lots or lower density like that, you can't assist with TIF. So it has to be 3 units per acre or greater in order to assist that. Well, the way to do that is to have some higher density, more, units, in some areas, and then you can make some of those lots a little larger.
And you're using up less farmland as fast as we are. I mean, we use up a lot of farmland. This way you keep it small, more the density, and you're not using it up as fast and still provide housing. So just to say
I
that it
think the
won't go out there.
side-by-sides you could sell, the fourplex, I think that'd be tough unless you're talking about like some of the areas that potentially could end up being redeveloped closer to downtown.
Well, I'm even thinking just new development, to say, hey, along
I wouldn't put-
35 or Hollister, we're gonna have fourplex, and then we might do the twin homes, and you can have the nice homes back by the trees, and if you get a developer to kind of do that, they probably make the same amount, using up less land, don't know, but.
Yeah, scaling it down a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't put a fourplex or greater next to a single family in a new subdivision, but it's certainly doable as you kind of scale it. You can do that from higher density to lower density. But it depends. I mean, you can have a policy or that, or like to see it, but you don't. Maybe you have some flexibility. Some communities have density requirements, and you give a little more flexibility if you say, okay, we're going to give you a density bonus, but you're going to do fourplexes or whatever the community wants to do. So, just an idea, just because without higher density, the affordability is it's not really attainable at this point. It may not be anyways. It really may not be anyways. But
Tax rates are high,
but yeah,
extremely high.
to get the tax rates down, you
Tax
need more
rates,
development.
property taxes.
Yeah,
More
more
tax base.
industry and commercial is what you really need.
True, but
Every time the state balances their budget.
then the other
Yep.
equation is, besides the higher, more units, it's looking at smaller lots. So looking at, you guys already have pretty small lots allowances in the city. So I looked at your subdivision ordinance, and there's not a lot of room there to add more lots. I think there was like 5 or 10 feet you could shrink or whatever, but really, what are you getting out of that? So it's something that we look at. A lot of communities don't have that low, that small lot size allowance. This was a carryover. The idea was a carryover from your old plan, which is accessory dwelling units. I don't know if there's been any talk about that here. Some communities are really excited about it. Some communities it becomes very controversial. Basically, it's and the cost of even building an accessory dwelling unit's $250,000 plus now. It's used to be like, oh, we're going to put a little apartment in my backyard. Well, once you factor in utilities and more asphalt and the building standards, it's not a cheap product, and so you barely get the rent needed for it. But it's basically a second little, you see it more in California, is where you come up if you ever watch any of those rehab shows or whatever, an income property, like they can get an accessory dwelling unit bonus in the back, and they convert their detached garage into an apartment. And but there's a lot of communities that think this is a one solution to making things more affordable. I haven't seen really any success in that level, but that's another thing. Again, this was from your old plan. Traditional neighborhood development, communities over 12,500 are required to have a traditional neighborhood development ordinance. You guys are not, but it's still something that you can include. It really is more of like a little neighborhood. It's in itself. You have like a little mixed-use development, which has some commercial, and you have narrower streets, and you have a little more flexibility in some of the density and things like that. But it's I don't believe you guys have a traditional neighborhood development, but you do have a PUD, so you could use your PUD as your traditional neighborhood development. What I touched on before, aging in place, having the zero entry, and then more ADA accessibility, and usually like bathroom, laundry, all on the main floor. That's becoming more desirable anyways with most development. But that's just something to think about. That also helps, like I said, starter homes, but also for elderly and retirees. So.
Quick question.
Yep.
If I may, just circling back on the accessory dwelling unit, that was a topic here for once, and somebody had a good idea as we talked about the challenges that might bring to the community of, it was discussed, and somebody had the idea of like owner occupied subdwellings like you have to own the primary
Yep.
and live there to have a sub.
Yep.
And I thought that was a great idea. That helps to combat, right? I mean, some of the challenges that might be if somebody were to buy a property and put 2 rentals on it, and not live
Right.
there. It's like that starts to invite some of the negative that might come from that.
Well, less oversight, you know, if you got 2 renters, they're not really paying attention to what the other's doing, and then you can have a whole mess of
Right.
problems. And if you have a neighbor, or if the primary is the owner, they're gonna keep the noise down, they're gonna make sure that that's contained in,
Yeah.
you know. And you see that in a lot of ordinances that are done with an accessory dwelling unit, you're gonna have usually 5 to 6 or 7 different conditions that you can do this, but you're gonna have, it's gonna look like the house, it's gonna look like the principal structure, you're gonna have to have owner occupied, you can, you know, you have to have some, you know, parking spaces, or there's just different, either architectural or design or other criteria that you're gonna incorporate into an ordinance like that, but that's a good point. So with that, we're to the end of the chapter, other than, I mean, the other section that I didn't touch on, but there's a load of programs that we have that are looking through different, both locally and then statewide and national programs that are for housing. A lot of the recent legislation that the city has done, or the state has done, was 2023, they adopted what's kind of a WIDA loan program, and it really, we don't really see very many people take advantage of it. The state approved over $500 million in loans, essentially, or programs that can assist communities in affordable housing, and they made way too many hurdles and steps for it to be really that effective. So I don't have any clients that take advantage of it. I don't know any colleagues that have clients that take advantage of it. They're revisiting, the League of Municipalities is trying to, and other groups are trying to lobby the state to say, look, you gotta take away some of these hurdles. So some of the hurdles were, you had to change your comp plan, you had to change some zoning codes or reduce costs specifically for that project. So you're gonna go and tweak your ordinance to, for a specific developer, which just seems really counterintuitive to me. You couldn't have a project that was in a TIF district where the project was gonna receive funds. So it's like, where these projects are likely to happen, you're already kind of killing the other financial support to the project. So I think there may be some changes in legislation, hopefully, to help this program go. But it's, we'll see. We just, like you said, that's one of the dozens of programs listed, I think, in the plan. But so feel free to take a look at those if you have questions on programs. A lot of those, you know, are either for developers. Some of them are for the city to apply for. And then next time we'll get into the goals, objectives, and policies.
The one thing I guess I just want to touch upon as we're looking at housing and transitioning next month, we'll look at this again, but we're transitioning to land use. There's a specific question of like the future development or the area of Prescott that specifically has grown around a large chunk of industrial, which is I-2, which by the year gets worse and worse and gets into a further state of deterioration. And as we're looking at residential and the potential for trying to find an area for medium and high density, keeping that in mind, specifically speaking off Canton, Pearl Street, I believe, as well on the other side. And the long-term goal of, I mean, obviously changing the land use there doesn't do anything, but obviously there'd be some pushback if we wanted to go that way. But I think it also, for the long-term benefit of the city of Prescott, would be something that would be hugely beneficial.
Where is that?
Didn't we try
Jake
that?
Seed Company, the old seed plant.
We've
right?
talked about rezoning that before, and that's what you're talking about now, is just,
Well, I'm just talking about in the comp plan, looking at changing the future land use. I don't know if we want to go all the way to rezoning, but that would be the next step after that.
Would there be anything like, what do they call, it's manufacturing and the treatment, you know, seed company uses certain chemicals. Is there such a thing as like a brownfield grant where you get a grant and we just buy the damn thing, tear it down, and then we find a developer that'll develop it, and then we rezone it after we buy it, and then get a developer to maybe come in and say, hey, we'll provide the land and,
Put fourplexes or whatever.
or 10-unit apartment buildings, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe, because it's close enough to the highway and it's still kind of a buffer, you got
Project.
trailer park to one side. So maybe that's what we should shoot for, is get a brownfield or call it a blighted TIF, if we have room for it. Call it blighted TIF and just buy it, tear it all down, and start from there. And then the TIF, whatever we get to go back in there, hopefully pay for what we paid to tear that kind of an eyesore down.
Yeah, so
Just a thought.
you're talking where
Yeah,
like
it
dance
seems like-
studio is, basically, like that building?
Correct, that
All the way
whole
to-
block,
all
not
the
just the
way
building, I
to
mean,
the-
that whole.
That is up for
block.
sale for a mill right now. That building was. It was on the market. I was
And there
looking.
again, if we get a
Yeah.
brownfield grant, maybe that's what we start shooting for, or a TIF, and can, you know, we'd have to
There's
decide, is it worth?
The city always has this idea that the TIF's gonna pay for itself, and then they have to
It's not.
raise taxes on the community, because it just seems to not.
The taxes go up no matter what, because we could collect, so when UNFI comes in the, back into the fold, that's where it'll benefit us. You're right, it doesn't help us in the
20
short
years out,
term,
yeah.
but that building down there really isn't helping us right
No.
now. So that's why I'd say, I just wouldn't say let's tear it down. That's I know what you mean by that. I was used to be TIF no way, but I understand why. In this case, I think it's more just to make the community better.
Yeah.
And hopefully it breaks even. If a TIF can break even, that's my goal.
I'm
What do you
pretty
do
sure
with all
there's
the
a couple, I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure there's a few businesses that are in
Yeah.
there that are.
But and so we find
Yeah.
places for them, you know, whatever. I mean, that's they rent
Some businesses that are.
the dance studio and a few people there, and they're
And
probably are
I
thriving.
think there's some boat storage back there too. Is there?
Yeah, on
Yeah,
the
Yeah,
backside.
and a salon
You
and.
see what I'm saying?
Put that out in the industrial park. I know where you're coming from, and I understand that, but it also is a big
I see.
eyesore. And part of it, you know, and part of it isn't. So maybe you buy it and say, okay, fine, can we section that part off, leave them as is, but buy the rest of it, it's just hodgepodge of.
You were talking
What kind of
mostly the old
manufacturing is
dryers
going
and
on
the-
there? Like-
I would even go to Trio, I'd go to the next block over, right next to the laundromat, I'd try to get that whole
Yeah.
section.
The
Because
building,
we're getting
the building
after
started on
stuff.
fire
Yeah,
too,
your
right?
charge for this project is really, when we get to the land use, we'll make note that that's an area we wanna look at. What do we see there for the future? So the future land uses, we don't have to really know, I mean, there'll be a current land use analysis, and then we look at and say, what do we want it to be in the future? That doesn't mean you change the rules, you're not changing zoning. It's just that when there is time to rezone it, that's what we'd like to see it become. And so, there are brownfield grants, there are, there's an environmental TIF district that we could do, there's different things, but yeah, you have to have the increment in order to pay for, I've seen communities, they create a TIF, they knock a building down, and they're stuck with it because nothing happened. And so, but it's, you still have the option for, if it's a blighted TIF, or, if there's a successful TIF, you can always donor to that TIF that can help it if there isn't a development that happens.
Yeah, that's just stealing.
It's borrowing, but yeah, I mean, it sometimes you need to do that in order for something to happen. But,
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what happened in the past with TIDs, if there was some sort of but generally that's what we've done in the past, is we borrowed from one fund and gave to another, we make the development happen, that generates the increment, and the increment is what pays for then the future development, and then we pay the original fund back with the increment that was.
And Josh, that would be like where the UNFI is, just so you know, I think it's a 15-year TIF. Well, we were doing so well that we could close it early, or it would break even if we bought that, because
Yep.
it'd still pay for itself.
I remember when you first started the TIF and there was no Unified though, that's what I'm getting at.
Oh, that was a bad year, though.
That's what I'm worried about getting a new TIF.
I know what you mean, 2000, was it 2011 they bought that? Mike
Yeah.
Warner started it. and
8.
That
And
happens.
then how did they pay the
2007 is
bills?
when we started TID.
Pardon?
How did they pay the bills at the time when nobody, remember how they paid the bills?
They borrowed money from the city and they paid it back, though. No, the TIF paid that back. That was part of
But the city had to,
borrow money, I think.
As a
I'm not
general.
sure.
yeah.
But you're right.
We had a bond.
But you're right.
Bonded for it.
You're right. The city had to kind of carry it until it could pay the city back.
Yep.
So the city loaned it money.
So
The
I
city
think it
has
just-
zero money. Where does the city get its money?
Well, they borrow it and then you and I have to pay that
Yes.
interest until that kicks into place. There's no doubt about that. I would agree with you.
And if there's a successful TIF district with excess cash, that's when you can use that money to donor to,
Or you could also close it early and give it back to the
and you
taxpayers.
absolutely
Yep.
could do that. But
Yep.
if you're gonna be borrowing for another project in it,
Or just don't borrow.
or you could leave it blighted, and, I mean, there's ways to do it, but I mean, it has to be,
I think that probably will be a good topic of conversation for our next meeting.
Or down the road.
What to do with, down the road, like what
so yeah, because we'll have two
businesses,
chapters. that are-
businesses and stuff.
Future land use.
We'll have an
Yeah,
economic
future land
development
use.
chapter, we'll be discussing that, and then future land use. So,
That'll be
I mean, those are all things that we, it's all policy decisions that we'll get to discuss and kick around. But good talk. I appreciate the
All right.
feedback.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, is there?
Make a
other
motion
business?
to adjourn.
Second.
Well, I knew where you were going.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
See how slow I am?
Hey, no, that's fine, Mike.